You know, I'd spent 30 years helping the city plan and build infrastructure, bridges, pipes, drainage, the whole damn skeleton of the suburbs. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the federal incident that followed when I decided to lay down 20 feet of concrete pipe on my own property. You just think, I'm retired, I'm on my own land, I'm good, right? Wrong. So wrong. This whole mess started with the mud, that thick, Georgia red clay that turns into a slick, unholy mess every spring. I live on what's called the Old Quarry Lot, a 5-acre slice of land that borders Willow Creek Heights, one of those aggressively neat HOA developments where the manicured lawns look like they've been steam-pressed. My place, however, is grandfathered in, sitting on the county line with a single, unpaved access road, or what I fondly called the river during rain season, running up to my cabin. For 3 decades, I pushed paper for megaprojects, signing off on 10-mile stretches of highway. But this little project was personal. It was about solving a problem the right way, with my own hands. I finally decided I'd had enough of the sludge. I wasn't fixing it with gravel anymore. I was doing it right. A proper, subterranean culvert, all heavy-duty concrete pipe and reinforced head walls. I even brought my nephew, a structural engineer, out for 2 weeks, and we worked like hell, sweating and grinding, building something truly solid. We dug the trench by hand, set the massive pipe, poured the concrete apron, and finished it with native river rock. When we finished, it wasn't just a path, it was structure, clean, solid, and built to last 200 years. The kind of work that settles a man's soul, you know? It made the whole property feel anchored for the first time. A few neighbors stopped by, mostly good people, just curious. Old man Jenkins, who runs the dairy farm nearby, dropped off a case of cold water and just nodded his approval. One guy, Simon Hayes, a new transplant, renting down the ridge, kept showing up with a fancy camera, claiming he was a nature photographer doing a book on local wildlife. He was quiet, but he asked pointed questions, not about the cement mix, but about the exact survey coordinates, the setback distance from the creek's historical flow, all that stuff. I told him I had the plats to prove my boundary, and he just nodded, his eyes always scanning, never quite meeting mine, like he was cataloging my whole existence. It felt odd, like talking to an auditor, not an artist. Then, 3 days later, the white SUV rolled up. Out stepped Delia Albright, president of the Willow Creek Heights HOA. If smugness wore khaki and pearls, it would be Delia. She had 2 muscle-bound henchmen in crisp polo shirts, clipboards held like shields, the kind of men who looked like they failed out of police academy but were great at fetching lattes, and they approached my newly finished culvert like it was a crime scene. "Mr. Vance," Delia purred, her voice dripping with artificial politeness, "we have observed the construction of what appears to be a bridge or a large retaining structure connecting to a publicly used right-of-way." She stressed the word bridge because she knew that implied a whole different level of state oversight. I set down my coffee and leaned against my porch rail, trying not to laugh. "That's a culvert, ma'am, and it's on my property. My property line runs right along that creek bank. It's a drainage improvement, nothing more." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. "Yes, but it falls under our 50-foot aesthetic impact radius as defined by Section 9, Article C of the Association's bylaws. We'll need to see your state engineering permit for construction of a load-bearing structure, as well as the environmental impact report. Furthermore, the exposed concrete is a clear violation of our natural materials and tonal palette regulation. Frankly, Art, this eyesore is not within the character of our community." "Eyesore?" I scoffed. "It's concrete, Delia, and it's buried. And you're standing on land that has never, ever, been under the jurisdiction of your little kingdom. I was here before Willow Creek was even a damn blueprint, and my deed is clear. I've read more infrastructure law than you've read furniture catalogs." I was done being polite. This was pure, unadulterated overreach, the kind of petty tyranny that thrives in suburban isolation. The big one, whose name I later learned was Ken, stepped forward, his neck veins popping. "We're giving you 48 hours to provide proof of compliance, or we issue a stop work order and impose daily fines of $1,000. This is non-negotiable." "You go ahead and write those fines, boys," I said, turning to walk inside. "But when you send them, make sure they're addressed to the county sheriff." Because that's who I'll be calling when you trespass on my land again." The door shut with a satisfying thud. The last thing I heard was Delia sighing dramatically, as if I was the unreasonable one ruining her Tuesday. That night, I was sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by plat maps and zoning laws, preparing my legal counterpunch, when I found it, an envelope tucked under my mailbox flag. Inside, a single, typewritten note, signed only with the initials SW. The message was chillingly brief. "They don't care about the culvert. Look at the old property sales. The power is in the boundary lines." It hit me like a shot of cold bourbon. The culvert was just the smoke screen. The boundary line, the place where my wild land met their manicured kingdom, that was the prize. They weren't fighting over aesthetics. They were fighting over control of the border. I didn't sleep much, that note burning a hole in my mind. I couldn't shake the memory of Simon Hayes, the photographer, asking about coordinates. Maybe SW stood for Simon. Maybe it didn't, but the clue felt real. I had decades of contacts in the municipal planning office, so I spent the next 2 days diving deep into the property transfer records for Willow Creek Heights and the surrounding lots. I requested every deed, every lien filing, and every court document related to property disputes within a half-mile radius, focusing on the last 7 years. What I found made my blood run cold. It wasn't a pattern, it was a system. Over the past 7 years, 14 parcels, all prime spots, mostly on the edge of the HOA's territory, had followed the exact same path. An elderly resident sells the lot to a new family. The new family renovates or builds a custom home. And then, 6 to 12 months later, the original elderly seller files a claim of mental incompetence or undue influence, invalidating the sale. The new homeowner, usually middle class and outmatched legally, is left with nothing but debt and a lawsuit, and the land often quietly ends up under the control of a shell corporation linked to the Willow Creek Board. The clincher? Every single case involved the same 2 law firms, Blackwood and Stern and Jensen Legal, and the same psychologist, Dr. Ronald Finch, providing the expert diagnosis of early-stage dementia. The pattern was so clean, so repeatable, it was like they were running a property laundering machine. They weren't just HOAs, they were land pirates, using the facade of community governance and legal loopholes to steal improved real estate. I was organizing the stack of paper trails, copies of deeds, court filings, and medical evaluations, when Delia returned. This time, she came alone, driving a modest sedan, not the white SUV, trying to project a more reasonable image. She sat across from me on the porch swing, all business, no smiles. "Art, we both know you've been busy," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You've seen some things in those public records, and frankly, some of those old files are messy, purely administrative oversights, you understand." She started talking about data entry errors and poor file management, treating me like a naive old man who just misunderstood basic accounting. I reached into my shirt pocket, subtly activating the tiny recorder disguised as a veteran's pin I hadn't worn in years. I had 2 rules in life. Always check your sight lines, and always record a bribe. Messy how, Delia? Messy like systematic fraud, or messy like a zoning violation? She leaned in, and I could smell her expensive perfume. Her tone shifted from conciliatory to intensely serious. "We are prepared to offer a definitive, confidential resolution. $150,000. Tax-free. In exchange, you withdraw your complaint to the county, sign a non-disclosure regarding the past property transfers, and agree to grant the HOA a perpetual, non-exclusive easement on that boundary line section, right where your structure is located." She pointed directly at the culvert, making it crystal clear that the structure was just the price of entry. I felt the rage rising, but I kept my voice steady, conversational, like we were just talking about the weather. "You're offering me hush money to look the other way while you steal land from people who trusted you, Delia. You're trading a couple of concrete pipes for a lifetime of silence, aren't you?" Her eyes, usually so cold, were now alight with a predatory gleam, and her perfect smile finally cracked. "I'm offering you peace, Art. The easiest path. And I suggest you take it quickly. The alternative is that we use our considerable resources, and trust me, they are considerable, to bury you in civil suits until you're bankrupt and your little culvert is declared a public safety hazard and condemned. You'll be financially ruined and watch that land revert to the county. Think about your quiet life, Art. Is it worth this fight? I just smiled, slow and easy. You know, Delia, I spent 30 years building roads. I know where all the bodies are buried, literally. Get off my property. And tell your lawyers to get their pencils sharp, because I'm coming for everything. She stormed off, leaving her offer hanging in the humid air like a threat. But her visit was recorded, every word, every dollar amount, every confession of motive. 2 days later, I drove that recording in a heavily documented case file to the district attorney's office. I didn't wait for a response. I just dropped the package and walked away, knowing I had just declared war. That's when they stopped playing by the rules. I was outside about a week after that, hosing down the old tractor. It was early afternoon, perfectly quiet. I saw a dark SUV with tinted windows parked down the road, idling. I didn't like it, but I figured I was too visible for anything stupid. I was dead wrong. I turned the hose off, and 2 figures materialized from the tree line. Not the polite HOA thugs this time. These were pure, unbadged muscle, wearing plain black shirts. Before I could even raise an arm, they were on me. The first guy hit me square in the kidney, knocking the air out of my chest, and I went down hard on the gravel. I felt the second guy's knee on my back, grinding me into the dirt, and his hand was yanking frantically at the back of my belt, searching for the small, fireproof satchel I usually kept my files in. You should have taken the cash, old man. A voice growled near my ear, smelling of cheap aftershave and malice. You should have just stayed retired. Your boss should have learned not to bribe a man with a recorder. I gasped, spitting a mouthful of dirt. That earned me a short, brutal jab to the ribs, enough to make my vision gray out for a second. The thug on my back grunted in frustration. The satchel wasn't there. They were clearly after my evidence, and now they were escalating from intimidation to physical theft. But what they didn't account for was Jerry. Jerry lived a quarter-mile away, the retired fire chief, a man who kept to himself but was fiercely protective of his quiet life. I heard his screen door slam, and then the unmistakable sound of a diesel truck engine roaring to life. He was there in seconds, driving his massive, modified utility truck, the one he used to fight forest fires, straight onto my lawn. He didn't say a word, didn't need to. He just pulled the lever on the side of the truck and hit the siren, letting loose a wail that could wake the dead. Then he adjusted the nozzle and hit the main pump. 200 pounds of pressurized water from a high-velocity fire hose blasted the 2 goons. They went down screaming, scrambling for footing in the sudden deluge. It was cinematic, surreal, beautiful, a full-force, cold shower of instant justice. Jerry kept the stream trained on them, bouncing them off the gravel, pinning them to the ground like angry puppies under a relentless downpour, while I, bruised and aching, crawled back onto the porch. Police are on the way, you corporate slime. Jerry yelled, his face grim, his hose hand rock steady. They'll dry out in a county jail cell. When the county sheriff arrived, they found 2 soaked, shivering thugs and an extremely angry retired city planner. The thugs had no IDs, but the SUV they drove was traced back to a holding company with direct financial ties to the Willow Creek Heights Legal Counsel. The sheriff, a good old boy named Chief Hayes, was already looking at the HOA for unrelated disputes, and this assault was the match that lit the fire. I was still sore, nursing a massive bruise on my ribs, when the phone rang that evening. Art, a voice said, calm and professional, this is Hayes. Simon Hayes. I paused, breathing through the pain. The photographer. Your manuscript got rejected, I take it. He chuckled, a dry, weary sound. Special Agent Simon Hayes, Department of Justice, White Collar Crimes Division. The SW was S. Hayes. We've had a loose net around Willow Creek for 18 months, following the money trail and the property flips. Couldn't get anything to stick, because every single victim was compromised by the mental incapacity defense. I just stared at the wall. You were the one leaving the notes, SW. And the coordinates. We knew they were using the boundary line as the choke point for their acquisitions. You building that culvert, a piece of permanent, registered infrastructure right on that line, forced their hand. It was the only way to get you looking in the right direction without breaking cover. We needed someone outside the network, someone clean, with the knowledge to trace the paper trail and the stubbornness to stand up to a bully. He paused. We needed a trigger, Art. You were it. We were watching the whole time, waiting for them to make a move that would stick in criminal court, not just civil. I should have felt used, but all I felt was a profound sense of rightness. I wasn't fighting an HOA over a drainpipe anymore. I was fighting systemic corruption, and I had a Fed on my side. So all those questions about zoning and surveys, I said, you were just verifying your own files. Precisely. Making sure your facts were solid before we pushed you into the light. He confirmed. The rest was a whirlwind of subpoenas and raids. The DA and the FBI, working together, moved like a perfectly engineered machine. The assault footage went viral, turning the tide of public opinion instantly. Nobody likes seeing a retired man beaten up over a driveway. The real dam broke when they served Delia Albright with a warrant. She showed up at the courthouse, still smiling for the cameras, claiming innocence. But the FBI agents didn't bother with the facade. They raided the HOA's main office, pulling out boxes of financial records, hard drives, and eventually, a secret ledger hidden in the back of Delia's private filing cabinet. The ledger spelled out the entire operation, code names, payouts, and all. The scale of the fraud was staggering. 14 families systematically cheated out of their homes. Delia and her inner circle weren't just managing a community. They were running an organized crime ring disguised as suburban governance. They arrested Delia, her vice president, the two key lawyers from Blackwood and Stern, and even the psychologist who had been rubber-stamping the false dementia diagnoses. It took 6 months, but the justice was comprehensive. The state courts, using my recording and Simon's evidence, declared that the Willow Creek Heights HOA had operated primarily as a criminal enterprise. They ordered the immediate dissolution of the HOA and the seizure of its assets. Dozens of fraudulent property liens were cleared, and restitution funds were set up for the victims. It was a total, clean sweep. The best part? That massive, elegant, ridiculously oversized HOA headquarters building, the symbol of Delia's power, with its unnecessary columns and pretentious flags, was sold off to the county for pennies on the dollar. They leveled it, every pristine inch of it. The land was converted into a public community park. No fees, no codes, no entry requirements, just open, free green space. I even helped out, not with the construction, but with the planning. And I made sure the parking lot for the new community center was built right over the section of boundary line that Delia had tried to secure with her $150,000 bribe. Justice, served cold, in asphalt and concrete. The county called it the Freedom Green. Simon came by one last time, a few weeks later. He wore a quiet dignity now, no more photographer act, no badge, just a man looking at the outcome of his work. The culvert is holding up well, he noted, gesturing to my driveway. Built it to last, I replied. He handed me a sealed USB drive. This is the closed file. Declassified case summary, transcripts, photos of that ledger. The Bureau wanted you to have it. You earned the right to see how deep the rabbit hole went. Art. I took the drive, heavy in my hand. He looked tired, but satisfied. I'm heading out, he said. Took the pension. Got 10 acres up in the Appalachians. Thinking about raising bees. No more HOAs. I asked. If they try to tell me what color to paint my fence, I'll tell them I've got a fully documented 37-count federal indictment ready to go, he smirked. He walked over to my porch swing, hesitated, and then knelt down. He carved one single, small inscription on the underside of the seat, where only I would ever see it. The road you pave goes further than you think. He was gone a minute later, driving off to chase silence and bees. A year later, the park is thriving. Kids are playing past dusk, cars are parked on the grass, and no one is telling anyone else what to do. The neighborhood has changed. It's looser, happier, more like an actual community than a tightly controlled corporate entity. Neighbors actually talk over the fence now instead of just exchanging tense nods. But sometimes, when I sit out on my porch and look across the valley at the vibrant, chaotic life happening where Delia's sterile dictatorship used to stand, I wonder. I won the fight, I brought down the criminals, and I helped clear the land of corruption. But at what cost? We replaced a corrupt, petty aristocracy with the heavy hand of the federal government. Did we exchange one set of unwanted masters for another, simply because the new one wore a better badge? Or is a community incapable of self-governance without either tyranny or external intervention? It makes you think. It makes me wonder what happens next, Now that the order, however false, is gone. What do you all think? Did the ends justify the means here? Was the complete and total dissolution of the HOA the only way to deliver true justice? Or does that level of government intervention create a vacuum that will just lead to a whole new set of problems? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd really like to hear your take on what comes after the bulldozers leave.